Resourceful Designer, episode 58, Talking to Clients. Choose your words carefully.
Welcome to the Resourceful Designer Podcast, offering solutions to streamline your graphic and web design business so you can get back to designing. And now, your host. He's actually used the word password as a password. Mark DeCote.
Welcome to the podcast. Thank you very much for tuning in this week as we discuss choosing the right words when talking to your clients. Now that'll be the main topic for this week, but first I just want to give you a little update. I mentioned last week how I had gotten a lot of new jobs come in and how it was going crazy. Well, you know the way it is in this business, things go good and bad. Well, this week, I don't think my phone rang a single time and not a single email for a new job coming in. But that's okay. I've still got a lot of things to work on. But I did tell you last week that I got a new website design project in the works. Well, that one I did lose. And to Vistaprint, of all places, my client contacted me and decided that they just weren't ready to spend the money that I had quoted them, and they decided to build their own website on Vistaprint. I didn't even know that Vistaprint offered a website building service. But regardless, they contacted me because I have control of their domain name and amongst other stuff. Like I do other stuff for them. It was just this was a side project they were working on, and they didn't want to invest the money in this side project. So I still do their main company's website, and I'm still going to be doing that, but it's just this side project. So I redirected the domain name to their new website, which I must say it's a pretty looking website, but I did send them an email and saying that, websites are a lot more than just pretty pages. They have to do a lot more than just looking good when people visit them. And I gave them a rundown of what to expect and told me that at any time in the future, if he wants to come to me and if the website's not working out the way he's thinking, just give me a call. So easy come, easy go. But it's just strange on our industry, where 1 week the phone and the email is just going off the hook and getting all sorts of new projects, and all of a sudden everything is just crickets the next week and not a single new thing comes in. But the ups and downs of running a home-based graphic design business. So that's what I've been up to this past week. And now I want to share this week's resource of the week. Now this week's resource is Think with Google's Test My Site page, which can be found at testmysite.thinkwithgoogle.com. And I'll have a link to this in the show notes, which you could find at resourcefuldesigner.com/episode 58. Now, what this site is used for, it's to test how mobile friendly your website is or your client's website is. And you find out how well it works across both mobile and desktop platforms. Now, the site provides you with 3 basic scores out of 100. Mobile friendliness, mobile speed, and desktop speed. And then you can request a free detailed report by email that'll explain how you can improve your website, the different areas to look in. Or you can simply click, once you get that online quick report, you can click and it'll provide you basic ideas of what you need to look into in order to improve your site speed. Stuff like optimize your images better or compress your JavaScript, that sort of thing. So if you're interested in your site speed and how well it's doing for mobile friendliness, please check out testmysite.thinkwithgoogle.com. Or just, as I said, visit the show notes, resourcefuldesigner.com/episode 58, where you can find all the links I may mention in this episode. And now, talking to clients. Choose your words carefully. Now, every industry has its own language. Design is no different. When talking to clients, we have to remember that they're not part of our industry. And if we're not careful, we may scare them away. I remember the first time I realized this. A potential client called to discuss a possible job, and we spent about 30 minutes on the phone talking about the project and figuring out the best way to go about designing it. I gave him some ideas and he pitched his own thoughts. And at the end of the conversation, the client said he wanted to move forward with me. And we made an appointment to meet in person to iron out all the final details. Now, on a side note, this was back in the days before I actually started using contracts where a handshake was all that was required. So nowadays, every job requires a contract, and I do hope you are working with a contract to save yourself. And it just makes everything go smooth. You know what's expected of you. Your client knows what's expected of you. But back in those days when I was doing this, a handshake was all that was required in order to get a project started. Well, anyways, when we hung up the phone or before hanging up the phone, the client told me how different it was talking to me compared to the other designers he had contacted because I wasn't the first one. He was out getting quotes for the job. And he told me that the other designers made him feel dumb because he didn't understand half of what they told him. But with me, it was like having a conversation with a friend. He understood everything I said, and he could picture exactly what I meant in his mind. In the end, he told me it wasn't the price that made him choose me. In fact, I wasn't the cheapest bid. I don't know if I was the more expensive one or what, but he told me I wasn't the cheapest. But it was the way I talked to him that founded our new relationship. Now, we completed that project. He loved it. And that client is still with me today. And I still do work for him on a regular basis. And there's a valuable lesson to learn there. If you try to make yourself sound important by using industry jargon, all you'll end up doing is alienating your client, making them feel dumb. And if they feel dumb when talking to you, they may not want to work with you. Let me tell you a little story. Our washing machine recently went on the fritz. It would go through the wash and the rinse, no problem. But when it came to the spin cycle, it just stopped. It wouldn't do anything. It would just sit there. And after a while, the washer would just say that the load was finished, your wash was complete, but the clothes were still dripping wet. Now, we could take them out and throw them in the dryer, but that would just take a long time. So the spinning is an important part of that cycle. So, of course, I called a repair guy. Now, this is somebody that I've used to repair other appliances a few times in the past, and I've always been happy with his services. So he came in and he had diagnosed it as being some actuator or something or other. He told me what it was called, but I didn't really understand it. And he said that's what's causing the problem. He ran some diagnostic tests. He did replace that part that I can't pronounce. And then he told me a bunch of mumbo jumbo that left my head spinning. He told me that the part that he replaced didn't really fix the issue. So he took it out and put mine back in. And in the end, he just told me that it ended up it's the motherboard that was sending all sorts of weird signals to all these different parts that I couldn't pronounce. And finally, motherboard was about the only word in the entire conversation I understood. And when you say motherboard, you automatically think cha-ching. And sure enough, he told me that it wasn't worth replacing. I'd be better off just scrapping the washing machine and purchasing a new one, even though this machine is only 4 years old. Now, the repair guy left. And to be honest, I had no idea what was wrong with the washing machine other than the motherboard, and it would cost me a lot of money. The guy kept talking to me and explaining all sorts of stuff, but it was all going way over my head, made me feel dumb, and I didn't appreciate that. Now, I didn't know if he was spewing all this jargon specifically to confuse me, or if it's just the way he was talking and the way he always talks. But either way, it left me not having confidence in him. So I actually called a second repair guy, somebody I'd never used before, to come and have a look for himself. Now, the second guy came in and he pointed out the exact same faulty part. But instead of calling it whatever the first guy called it, he told me, he did call it that same thing. But then he went on to tell me that it kind of acts like a sensor. And what it does is it reads the rotation on the washer drum. As it's spinning, it rotates. And he says there's a little marker on the drum, and this thing reads that marker as it goes by. And every time the drum turns, that part registers how fast and relays that information to the computer. And once a certain number of rotations have completed, it tells the computer to stop spinning to complete the cycle. The repairman then proceeded to explain to me, in words that I actually understood, the whole process involved to complete the wash cycle from when you first press the start button till the end when it tells you that your load is ready. Now, he did replace that same part that the first guy had replaced and told me that it didn't work. But he explained to me that in order to make sure it works properly, you have to run it through several cycles. You can't just put the machine in, start testing it, and then stopping and seeing, okay, was there any diagnostic errors? It says you got to run it through the whole cycle a couple of times to make sure it works, which is something the first guy didn't do. So after he calibrated it and he ran it through a few test cycles on his own, he told me to test the machine out for a few days, let him know if it works. And if it does work, then he'll just invoice me for the part and his labor. And if it doesn't work, he'll come back, he'll swap the pieces out. So he'll keep the new one. And then he says, we'll know that there's something else with the machine. Well, to make the long story short, the washing machine has been working perfectly ever since he came in. And I understand exactly what the second repairman did because of the way he explained it to me. As for the first guy, he may have thrown a lot of big words at me, which made him sound like he knew what he was doing. But it also caused me to second guess him because I didn't know what he was talking about. And because of that, made me want to go out and get a different opinion. Now, all of this to tell you that the same thing can happen to us as designers if we're not careful when we're talking to clients. Take a minute to think about all the design-related words we use. Words we take for granted because we use them on a regular basis. A client calls you up. They need a 64-page booklet. No problem. So you ask them, will it be perfect bound or saddle stitch? Is it self-cover? 4/4, 4/1, something else? Will there be spot colors involved? You want matte, satin, semi, gloss stock? Is there going to be a lamination, varnish, aqueous, UV coating? Will it bleed? What's the gutter size? What about creep? Do we have to worry about creep or will the printer worry about creep? Pagination? And is the printer setting it up in signatures or are we responsible for that? Now, if you designed for print, you should have understood all of that, or at least most of that. But to a client, it's a completely foreign language. And you need to know how to say all of this in a way they'll understand, but also without sounding condescending. Do you want the book to be folded in half and held together with staples? Or do you want it to have a flat spine and the pages glued in? Do you want the cover to be thicker than the stock used on the inside pages? Will there be color photos or images inside? And if so, will they be on all pages or will some pages be left black and white? Do you want the photos or images to run off the edges of the page? Or should there be white border around on all pages? Clients will be much more appreciative if you use a language they understand. It's the concept they need to know, not the industry's terminology. What if you're working on websites? Client calls up and says, I wanted you to design a brand new website for me. Sure, I presume you want it responsive. Since static sites are no longer recommended, we'll go with a dynamic site. Now, do you require multiple landing pages? Do you already have your domain registered? If so, what's the URL? Oh, so you need that done to your website? Yeah, that'll require some custom JavaScript. Do you plan on doing any e-commerce with the site? Okay, now let's talk about some SEO. Have you given any thought to your backlink strategy? You'll need it to increase your page juice. Again, this can leave a client's head spinning. Now, it might give them the impression that you know exactly what you're doing, but it might also give them the impression that they don't want to deal with you because they don't understand a word you're saying. Now, you know, if you've listened to past episodes of the podcast, that I'm a big advocate for building relationships with your clients. It's the best way to create loyalty, which in return will bring recurring work and referrals. Now, think about your everyday life. Do you have any meaningful relationships with people who make you feel dumb because you don't understand half the things they say? Of course you don't. And your business shouldn't be any different. So the next time you find yourself talking to a potential new client, be conscious of the words you use. Or if you do use any industry jargon, which I'm not saying you shouldn't, make sure you followed it up with an explanation. Not talking down to your client like you're explaining something to a child, but simply explaining a concept to a colleague. If you use the right vocabulary when talking to your clients, you may find a lot more bids and a lot more proposals ending in your favor. Now, I would love to know if you've ever found yourself in a situation where you didn't understand what was being said to you. Do you have a situation like my washing machine one? Or maybe it's something to do in design when you were talking to a client or something and you got the impression that they didn't understand what you were saying. I would love to hear your comments. So visit resourcefuldesigner.com/episode 58 and leave a comment for the episode. And now our question of the week. And this week's question comes in from Tyler. Now, I am paraphrasing a little bit here. The question was a bit long, so I've cut out a few little bits of it. But here's what Tyler asks. It says, in high school, I combined graphic design and videography to discover a wonderful world of motion graphics. I then moved away to go to school to learn as much as I could about the industry. 4 years of tutorials, playing in programs, and going to classes where I was ahead of the curve, and I find myself in a unique situation. At the beginning of last year, I felt ready to dive into the industry. I found a paid internship working for a government agency doing all of their media, design, photo, and video work. After a year of interning, they hired me on a 1-year contract. I have found that where I live, there's a market for what I've been doing for this government agency, and I think it would be a viable business. My biggest concern is simple. I'm afraid I don't have enough experience to start an undertaking like this. I know that I have the grit, and I would like to think I have the skill, but I'm fairly young, and I know that could scare businesses away. What do you think? Well, Tyler, first of all, thank you very much for the question. Now, as far as I'm concerned, talent trumps experience every time. You could have all the experience in the world, but if you don't have the talent, it really doesn't matter. And age doesn't matter when it comes to talent. I once hired a 13-year-old kid to do an illustration for a client's project. And I hired him because this kid was absolutely amazing. I would almost call him a prodigy when it came to drawing. I was just blown away by his skill. And that's why I hired him, because of his talent. His age never played a factor into it. I never gave a second thought that the fact that this kid was 13 years old. He had the style and the skill for illustrating that I was looking for. So I hired him. And I paid him what I would have paid a normal illustrator that was working as a living. The kid, I think he wanted like $20 for the illustration. And I told him, no, you're worth a lot more than that. And I paid him a couple of $100s for it, which was what the going price for an illustrator at the time. So age doesn't really play into that sort of thing. Now, you say you have the grit and you say there's a market in your area for your skills. So my opinion is to go ahead and test the water. Maybe search out some clients that you can do some stuff on the side while you're still working for the agency, as long as that's provided. Unless you sign something with the agency that said you won't do that sort of thing while working with them, I don't condone that. But if you don't have any sort of agreement with them, there's nothing stopping you from trying to find some clients on the side and get some work done, get your name out there. Will there be people that overlook you because of your age? Yes, of course there will be. But there'll also be people who will see you for who you are and will be eager to work with you because of your skill and your talent. And trust me, once you land your first client, that whole idea of being afraid of this will be gone. You won't feel that anymore. And the funny thing about aging, Tyler, is we're always getting older. If you get your feet wet now, you'll only be more confident as you get older. As the years go by, that confidence will build in you and you'll be a much better business person as well as designer. I started my business when I was 36 years old. And knowing what I know now, I wish I had made that choice when I was 26 years old, if not even earlier than that. So if you're seeking my advice, Tyler, I say don't worry about it. Just get going. You will have some pitfalls. There will be people that won't hire you because of your age, but there will be some that will. And that's where you gain your experience, you build your talent, and you build your reputation. So good luck. I wish you all the best. Now, do you have a question you'd like me to answer in a future episode of the podcast? I'm running out of questions. I really love to get more from you. Please visit resourcefuldesigner.com/feedback to submit your question for a future episode. Now, that's it for this week's episode. Short and sweet. I look forward to discussing a brand new topic with you next week. I'm not quite sure. I've got a few in my list, but I'm juggling them around. I'm not quite sure which one I'm going to talk about next week, so I'm not going to mention anything at this point. But I do look forward to discussing whatever topic it is with you. In the meantime, if you haven't downloaded it already, you can get my 4-week marketing boost by visiting marketingboost.net, or in the US, simply text Marketing Boost, all one word, to 44222. And you can download my free 4-week marketing boost, which is a guide that has 20 short, maybe 20-minute steps that you can do, one per day for 4 weeks. And at the end, you will be positioned better to create the best first impression possible for when people come to your site looking for you. So once again, marketingboost.net is where you can get that, or by texting Marketing Boost, all one word, to 44222 if you're in the US. That only works in the USA. Now, if you're enjoying this podcast, please share it with a fellow graphic designer. I would be forever grateful. Till next time, I am Mark DeCote, wishing you all the best with your graphic design business. And as always, reminding you to stay creative.
Thanks for listening to the Resourceful Designer Podcast at resourcefuldesigner.com.